Welcome to our deep dive into the history of India. Today, we are beginning our exploration of a monumental shift in the subcontinent's history, the decline of the mighty Mughal Empire. We will trace the lineage of the emperors, examine their policies, and understand how a once invincible empire slowly fractured and gave way to foreign powers. Let's start by briefly looking at where the Mughals came from. The Mughals boasted a formidable pedigree, descending from two of history's greatest conquerors. On their mother's side, they traced their bloodline back to Genghis Khan, the legendary leader who united the Mongol tribes and ruled vast swaths of China and Central Asia. On their father's side, they were the heirs of Timur, the fearsome conqueror who dominated Iran, Iraq, and present-day Turkey. This dual heritage of nomadic warfare and imperial ambition deeply influenced the Mughal approach to conquest and governance. The story of the Mughal Empire in India begins with Zahiruddin Muhammad Babur. Babur's early life was fraught with hardship. He inherited the throne of Fergana in modern-day Uzbekistan in 1494 when he was just 12 years old. However, he was soon driven out of his ancestral lands by a rival Mongol group, the Uzbeks. After years of wandering as a landless prince, he captured Kabul in 1504. Looking eastward, Babur eventually marched into India. In 1526, at the historic First Battle of Panipat, his forces defeated Ibrahim Lodi, the last ruler of the Delhi Sultanate. Though he couldn't completely crush the Afghan and Rajput resistance during his short 4-year reign, Babur successfully laid the foundation for what would become a massive all-India empire. While Babur planted the seed, it was his grandson, Akbar, the third Mughal emperor, who truly grew the empire into a towering oak. Akbar didn't just conquer new territories, he masterfully consolidated them. Through a combination of brilliant military campaigns, strategic matrimonial alliances, and inclusive administrative reforms, Akbar integrated diverse regions and peoples. Under his rule, the Mughal Empire transformed from a foreign conquering force into an indispensable central pillar of Indian politics and society. Fast forward to the sixth emperor, Aurangzeb, who ruled from 1658 to 1707. Aurangzeb was a complex and highly orthodox ruler. Unlike Akbar, he abandoned the policies of religious tolerance and conciliation. He alienated many of his subjects and regional rulers by refusing to make peace. Yet, despite these socially harmful policies, Aurangzeb was a highly capable administrator. When he died in 1707, the Mughal administration was still remarkably efficient, and the army remained a formidable force. He also aggressively expanded the empire's borders, conquering southern kingdoms like Bijapur and Golconda, and pushing into the northeast. However, Aurangzeb's relentless expansion was a double-edged sword. By pushing the empire's boundaries so far south and east, he created a territory that was simply too vast to be governed effectively from a single central authority in Delhi. The communication lines were stretched thin, and regional governors began to act independently. When Aurangzeb died in 1707, he left behind an overextended state. His successors lacked his iron will and administrative genius, and they proved completely unable to maintain the unity of this massive empire. This marked the beginning of a long, agonizing decline that would ultimately end in 1857. The chaos began immediately upon Aurangzeb's death. His 3 sons fought a bitter war of succession. One son, Azam Shah, held the throne for a mere 3 months before being defeated. Ultimately, the 65-year-old Bahadur Shah emerged victorious, ruling from 1707 to 1712. Realizing the damage done by his father's rigid stance, Bahadur Shah actively reversed Aurangzeb's narrow-minded policies. He embraced religious tolerance, ensuring no temples were destroyed during his reign, and he actively sought compromise and conciliation with the various regional powers that had been alienated. While his political conciliation was a step in the right direction, Bahadur Shah was a poor financial manager. During his short reign, the administration deteriorated significantly. To win the loyalty of nobles, he recklessly handed out promotions and granted jagirs. A jagir was a specific piece of land assigned to a Mughal official, known as a jagirdar. Instead of the state collecting taxes from that land, the revenue went directly to the jagirdar as payment for their services. By giving away too many jagirs, Bahadur Shah severely depleted the central treasury, worsening the state's financial crisis. Let's look at how Bahadur Shah handled specific regional powers. With the Rajputs, he initially tried to assert greater imperial control, but facing resistance, he wisely pivoted back to a policy of conciliation. His approach to the Sikhs was similarly pragmatic at first. He made peace with the 10th Sikh guru, Guru Gobind Singh, even granting him a high imperial rank, or mansab. However, this peace was short-lived. After the guru's death, a massive rebellion broke out under the leadership of Banda Bahadur, forcing the emperor to take strong military measures and lead campaigns against the Sikh rebels. To understand the Sikh rebellion, we need to look at their leadership. Guru Gobind Singh was the 10th and final human guru of the Sikhs. In the late 17th century, he militarized the community by laying the foundation of the Khalsa Panth, or the Army of the Pure, to defend against Mughal oppression. When Guru Gobind Singh passed away in 1708, he declared that the line of human gurus would end. The political and military leadership of the Sikhs then passed to his highly capable and trusted disciple, Banda Singh, famously known as Banda Bahadur, who fiercely challenged Mughal authority in the Punjab. Down in the Deccan, Bahadur Shah's policy towards the Marathas was at best a half-hearted conciliation. The Marathas were demanding the right to collect two specific types of revenue. Bahadur Shah granted them the right to collect Sardish Mukhi, but he explicitly refused to grant them the more lucrative Chauth. Furthermore, he played a dangerous game of divide and rule. He refused to officially recognize Shahu as the rightful Maratha king, deliberately leaving the succession ambiguous. This allowed a bitter civil war to rage between Shahu and his aunt, Tarabai, keeping the Marathas divided, but also keeping the Deccan in a state of constant turmoil. You might be wondering what Chauth and Sardeshmukhi actually were. These were two critical sources of income for the Maratha Empire. Chauth, which literally means 1/4, was a protection tax. It was a levy of 25% of the total revenue collected from external territories in exchange for a promise that the Marathas would not raid them. Sardeshmukhi, on the other hand, was an additional 10% surcharge on land revenue. It was collected in districts where the Marathas claimed hereditary rights, acting as a direct tribute paid to the Maratha king in his capacity as the supreme head of the revenue collectors, or the Sardeshmukh. The Maratha civil war I mentioned was between two key figures, Shahu and Tarabai. Shahu was the grandson of the great founder of the Maratha Empire, Shivaji. He had been captured as a child and held prisoner by Aurangzeb for nearly 2 decades, from 1689 until his release in 1707. While Shahu was imprisoned, his aunt, Tarabai, had taken charge. As the regent, she valiantly led the anti-Mughal resistance in the name of her young son, Shivaji II. When Shahu returned, claiming his rightful place on the throne, Tarabai refused to step down. This sparked a devastating civil war between Shahu's faction in Satara and Tarabai's faction in Kolhapur. Returning to the Mughal court, Bahadur Shah died in 1712, plunging the empire into yet another civil war. But this time, something fundamental had changed in Mughal politics. It was no longer just royal princes fighting for the crown. Ambitious, powerful nobles stepped out of the shadows and became the real contenders for power. They began using the princes as mere puppets to seize control of the state apparatus. The winner of this succession war was Jahandar Shah, but his victory was entirely due to the backing of Zulfikar Khan, the most powerful noble of that era. During Jahandar Shah's brief reign, the actual administration was entirely in the hands of his wazir, or prime minister, Zulfikar Khan. Zulfikar Khan was a pragmatist who rapidly accelerated the reversal of Aurangzeb's orthodox policies. His most significant move was abolishing the jizya. The jizya was a controversial tax levied specifically on non-Muslim subjects in exchange for state protection. By abolishing it, he won immense goodwill. He also actively conciliated the Rajput kings and Maratha chiefs. However, he made no peace with the Sikhs, continuing the harsh military suppression of Banda Bahadur. Zulfikar Khan also recognized that the empire was bankrupt. To fix the finances, he stopped the reckless expansion of the Jagir system that Bahadur Shah had started. Instead, he revived a controversial practice known as the Ijara system. Under Ijara, the government essentially outsourced tax collection. They signed contracts with middlemen, or revenue farmers. These middlemen promised to pay a fixed lump sum to the imperial treasury. In return, they were given the right to squeeze as much tax out of the peasant farmers as they possibly could. While it provided quick cash for the state, in the long run it ruined the agricultural economy, decreased actual government revenue, and led to horrific oppression of the peasantry. Zulfikar Khan also tried to stabilize the Deccan region. In 1711, his deputy governor, Daud Khan Pani, struck a crucial deal with the Maratha king Shahu, which Zulfikar Khan officially confirmed. This agreement finally gave the Marathas what they had been demanding, the legal right to the Chauth and Sardeshmukhi revenues of the Deccan. However, there was a clever catch. To maintain the illusion of Mughal sovereignty, the agreement stipulated that Mughal officials would physically collect these taxes from the people and then hand the money over to the Marathas. Jahandar Shah's reign lasted barely a year. In 1713, he was overthrown and killed by his own nephew, Farrukh Siyar. Once again, the prince was merely a figurehead. The real architects of this victory were two powerful nobles known as the Sayyid brothers. As a reward, the elder brother, Abdullah Khan, was made the wazir, while the younger brother, Hussein Ali Khan, was appointed as the Mir Bakshi, which was the highly influential position of head of the military department. During Farrukh Siyar's reign, the Mughal army finally managed to defeat the Sikh leader Banda Bahadur in 1715, executing him the following year. But the alliance between the emperor and the Sayyid brothers quickly soured. Farrukh Siyar was not content to be a puppet. He wanted to exercise real personal authority. This led to a bitter, behind-the-scenes power struggle with the Sayyids, who had grown accustomed to running the state. The conflict reached a shocking climax in 1719. The Sayyid brothers, bringing in Maratha troops led by Peshwa Balaji Vishwanath for support, dragged Farrukh Siyar off the throne, blinded him, and killed him. This was a watershed moment. It was the very first time in the long history of the Mughal Empire that an emperor was assassinated by his own nobles. The aura of imperial invincibility was shattered forever. Before his demise, Farrukh Siyar made a decision with massive historical consequences. In 1717, he issued 3 royal decrees, known as farmans. These farmans granted the English East India Company the incredibly valuable right to export and import their goods completely duty-free in Bengal and other regions. At the time, it seemed like a minor concession to foreign merchants, but this duty-free status gave the British a massive economic advantage over local traders, laying the financial groundwork for their eventual conquest of India. After murdering Farrukh Siyar, the Sayyid brothers earned the title of kingmakers. They quickly placed 2 young princes on the throne, both of whom died of illness within months. They then installed an 18-year-old named Muhammad Shah. The Sayyids continued the policies of religious tolerance, permanently abolishing the jizya and various pilgrim taxes, and making peace with the Rajputs and Marathas. However, their constant political maneuvering left the actual governance in ruins. The administration was paralyzed at all levels. Lawlessness spread, the treasury was completely empty, and the state couldn't even afford to pay the regular salaries of its officials and soldiers. To secure their southern flank, the Sayyid brothers signed a formal, sweeping agreement with the Maratha king Shahu. They officially recognized Shahu's right to Swaraja, which meant the independent rule over all the territories that were once part of his grandfather Shivaji's kingdom. They also granted him the direct right to collect Chauth and Sardeshmukhi across 6 major provinces of the Deccan. In exchange, Shahu agreed to pay an annual tribute of 10 lakh rupees to the emperor, maintain a force of 15,000 cavalry to support the Mughals in the Deccan, and take responsibility for maintaining peace and preventing rebellions in the region. The absolute power of the Sayyid brothers naturally bred intense jealousy among other noble factions. A powerful group, spearheaded by the brilliant noble Nizam-ul-Mulk, began conspiring against them. They rallied support by accusing the Sayyids of pursuing anti-Mughal and anti-Islamic policies. The young emperor, Muhammad Shah, eager to break free from his puppet masters, secretly backed this conspiracy. In 1720, the plot succeeded. The younger brother, Hussein Ali Khan, was assassinated in his camp. The elder brother, Abdullah Khan, tried to raise an army to fight back but was decisively defeated near Agra, bringing the era of the kingmakers to a close. With the Sayyids gone, Emperor Muhammad Shah finally had real power. He ruled for nearly 30 years, from 1719 to 1748. At the start of his reign, the empire still had a chance. The people still respected the crown, the artillery was strong, and regional rulers were still nominally loyal. This was the last real opportunity to save the Mughal Empire. Unfortunately, Muhammad Shah was not the leader the moment required. Nicknamed Rangila for his obsession with art, culture, and a highly luxurious lifestyle, he neglected state affairs. Instead of empowering capable ministers, he surrounded himself with corrupt, sycophantic nobles, allowing the administration in North India to rot from the inside out. The tragedy of Muhammad Shah's reign is best illustrated by the story of Nizam-ul-Mulk. Nizam-ul-Mulk was appointed wazir in 1722. He was a highly capable administrator who vigorously attempted to reform the corrupt system and restore imperial authority. However, Emperor Muhammad Shah consistently undermined his efforts, siding with the corrupt nobles at court. Frustrated and disgusted, Nizam-ul-Mulk simply gave up. He abandoned his post in Delhi, marched south, and established his own independent state of Hyderabad in the Deccan. His departure signaled to everyone that loyalty and virtue had fled the empire. This triggered the physical breakup of the Mughal state, as other strong governors soon carved out their own independent kingdoms in Awadh and Bengal, paying only lip service to the emperor in Delhi. Following Muhammad Shah, the empire fell into the hands of Ahmad Shah Bahadur, who ruled from 1748 to 1754. He inherited a shell of an empire. Ahmad Shah was a weak and ineffective ruler, completely dominated by his mother, Udam Bai. The actual administration was run by her and her favored companion, Javed Khan. This caused immense resentment among the traditional nobility. In 1752, the official wazir, Safdar Jang, had Javed Khan assassinated. The resulting chaos paved the way for a ruthless new wazir named Imad-ul-Mulk to seize control. In 1754, Imad-ul-Mulk deposed Emperor Ahmad Shah, cruelly blinded him and his mother, and threw them into prison for the rest of their lives. Needing a new puppet, the wazir Imad-ul-Mulk went to the royal prisons and pulled out a 55-year-old prince who had been locked away since 1714. He crowned him as Alamgir II. Having spent his entire adult life in captivity, Alamgir II had absolutely no experience in governance or warfare. He was entirely at the mercy of his wazir. It was during this tragic period that the empire suffered catastrophic foreign invasions from Nadir Shah and Ahmad Shah Abdali, which completely ruined the country's economy. It was also during Alamgir II's nominal reign that the British won the Battle of Plassey in 1757, establishing their first major territorial foothold in Bengal. Next came Shah Alam II, who ascended the throne in 1759. Unlike his immediate predecessors, Shah Alam actually possessed some personal ability and courage. But it was too late. The empire was beyond redemption. In a desperate bid to push back the growing British menace, Shah Alam II formed an alliance with the Nawab of Bengal, Mir Qasim, and the Nawab of Awadh, Shuja-ud-Dawla. Together, they confronted the British East India Company at the pivotal Battle of Buxar in 1764. The Indian coalition was decisively defeated. This forced Shah Alam II to sign the humiliating Treaty of Allahabad in 1765. Following the defeat at Buxar, the Mughal emperor was reduced to a dependent. For 6 years, Shah Alam II lived in Allahabad as a pensioner of the British East India Company. In 1772, he finally returned to his capital in Delhi, but only under the military protection of the powerful Maratha general Mahaji Scindia. Tragedy struck again in 1788 when an Afghan invader, Ghulam Qadir, captured Delhi and blinded the emperor. Finally, in 1803, the British defeated the Marathas and took control of Delhi. From that point until 1857, the Mughal emperors were nothing more than British pensioners. They had zero military power, yet the British kept them around because the Mughal name still commanded immense respect among the Indian people as a symbol of political unity. Shah Alam's son, Akbar Shah II, ruled from 1806 to 1837. His reign highlights the complete erosion of Mughal sovereignty. By 1835, the East India Company felt so secure in its power that it officially stopped calling itself a subject of the emperor and ceased issuing coins bearing his name. Despite his lack of political power, Akbar Shah II engaged in cultural and diplomatic efforts. He famously sent the great social reformer Ram Mohan Roy to Britain as his personal ambassador, bestowing upon him the title of Raja. He also championed cultural harmony in Delhi. One of Akbar Shah II's most beautiful legacies is the festival of Phul Walon Ki Ser, or the Procession of the Florists. He started this festival in 1812 to fulfill a vow made by his wife, Queen Mumtaz Mahal, for the well-being of their son. It stands as a powerful, unique symbol of Hindu-Muslim unity. During the festival, both communities come together to offer a floral canopy and fans at the shrine of the Muslim Sufi saint Khwaja Bakhtiar Kaki, and they make identical floral offerings at the ancient Hindu temple of Devi Yogamaya in Maroli. It was a poignant reminder of the syncretic culture the Mughals had fostered, even as their political power vanished. Finally, we arrive at Bahadur Shah Zafar, the 20th and very last Mughal emperor, who ascended the nominal throne in 1837. Like his father, he was merely a pensioner of the British, spending his days writing poetry rather than ruling. However, history called upon him one last time. When the massive revolt of 1857 erupted, the rebel soldiers marched to Delhi and proclaimed the elderly Zafar as the Emperor of Hindustan, making him the symbolic leader of the uprising. When the British brutally recaptured the Red Fort, Zafar was arrested, tried for treason, and exiled to Rangoon, where he died in 1862. With Queen Victoria's declaration on November 1, 1858, the Mughal Empire was officially erased from the map. As we move forward, we will examine the devastating foreign invasions that accelerated this tragic collapse. Nadir Shah founded the Afsharid dynasty of Iran, ruling from 1736 to 1747. By 1736, he had successfully gained control over most of what is now present-day Afghanistan. His reign, however, was cut short when he was assassinated in 1747. He was succeeded by his able general Ahmad Shah Durrani, who took over as the ruler of Afghanistan and is widely regarded today as the founder of the modern Afghan state. India's legendary wealth naturally attracted Nadir Shah's attention. At this time, the Mughal Empire had severely neglected the defenses on its northwest frontier. Because these crucial border protections were ignored, Nadir Shah was able to cross into Indian territory completely unopposed in 1738, setting the stage for a devastating confrontation. The invading forces of Nadir Shah finally clashed with the army of Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah at Karnal in present-day Haryana on February 13, 1739. Nadir Shah decisively defeated the Mughal army and captured the emperor himself. He then proceeded to ruthlessly plunder the wealthy citizens of Delhi, carrying away unimaginable riches, including the legendary Koh-i-Noor diamond and Shah Jahan's magnificent peacock throne. The defeat had severe territorial consequences. Nadir Shah forced Muhammad Shah to cede all of the empire's provinces located west of the Indus River to him. By losing Kabul and these strategic western territories, the Mughal Empire lost its natural defensive buffer, leaving it permanently vulnerable to future invasions from the northwest. Following Nadir Shah's death, his ablest general, Ahmed Shah Abdali, also known as Durrani, established his own rule over Afghanistan. Abdali proved to be a relentless threat to India, invading and plundering the northern regions 8 separate times between 1748 and 1767. The desperate Mughals even tried to buy peace by officially ceding the province of Punjab to him in 1751. The situation worsened when Abdali successfully captured Delhi in 1757. Before returning to Afghanistan, he didn't just leave, he set up a puppet government. He recognized Alamgir II as the titular Mughal emperor, but left behind an Afghan caretaker. Crucially, he appointed the Rohilla chief, Najib-ud-Dawla, as the Mir Bakshi, making him Abdali's personal supreme agent to control the empire from within. This Afghan control over Delhi did not sit well with the rising Maratha power. In 1758, the Maratha Sardar Raghunath Rao marched on Delhi, successfully expelling Abdali's agent, Najib-ud-Dawla. The Marathas then pushed further north, capturing Punjab and directly challenging Afghan authority in the region. This Maratha expansion provoked a fierce response. Ahmad Shah Abdali returned to India in 1759, specifically to take revenge. This culminated in the historic Third Battle of Panipat in 1761, where Abdali decisively defeated the Marathas. This defeat dealt a massive blow to the Maratha ambition of ruling all of India. Interestingly, despite his victory, Abdali chose not to stay and establish a new Afghan kingdom in India. These repeated foreign invasions were catastrophic. They completely shattered the prestige and financial stability of the Mughal Empire, ruining the broader economic life of the country. The administration was paralyzed. Desperate, impoverished nobles began heavily oppressing the peasant class to recover their lost wealth. By 1761, the once mighty all-India Mughal Empire had practically ceased to exist, shrinking to merely the Kingdom of Delhi. To understand how the empire fell so far, we have to look back to the death of Emperor Aurangzeb in 1707. While his rule saw some disruptions to unity, at the time of his death, the Mughal administration was actually still highly efficient. The state's finances were in much better shape than they would be later, and the dynasty still commanded immense respect across the subcontinent. However, the first half of the 18th century saw rapid disintegration. In 1724, the Wazir, Nizam-ul-Mulk, abandoned the central court to found the independent state of Hyderabad, triggering a physical breakup of the empire as other strong nobles followed suit. Though they paid lip service to the emperor, they ruled independently. By the early 19th century, the British occupied Delhi, reducing the emperor to a mere pensioner, until the dynasty was formally abolished in 1857. So what caused this massive decline? It actually started during Aurangzeb's reign. While he was a strong and capable ruler, he lacked crucial social, economic, and political insight. Despite inheriting an already massive empire, he obsessively pursued further expansion. He stubbornly refused the Marathas' demands for regional autonomy, making the empire too large to govern effectively from one center, which encouraged local officials to start defying central authority. Aurangzeb's relentless, decades-long campaign against the Marathas in the Deccan was particularly disastrous. Starting in 1698, he personally managed these wars, which meant he was absent from northern India for over 25 years. This neglected the vital northwest frontier, completely drained the empire's financial resources, ruined the Deccan's trade, and shattered the myth of the Mughal army's invincibility. Another major factor was a shift in religious policy. Early Mughal rulers maintained a secular state, fostering friendly relations between Hindus and Muslims and opening high offices to chiefs of all backgrounds. Aurangzeb, however, reversed this policy of non-interference. His strict religious policies alienated Hindu rulers and subjects, seriously damaging the social stability of the empire. Although his successors quickly tried to reverse these policies, the trust was already broken. The Mughals also suffered from a fatal tradition regarding succession. They did not follow primogeniture, where the eldest son automatically inherits the throne. Instead, they followed the Timurid custom of dividing inheritance among all sons. This practically guaranteed a bloody civil war every time an emperor died. These wars destroyed property, killed capable leaders, split the nobility into bitter factions, and allowed local chiefs to quietly consolidate their own independent power. In an autocratic system, the entire government relies on the character of the monarch. Unfortunately, the emperors who followed Aurangzeb were simply not capable leaders. They were far more interested in courtly luxuries and personal comfort than in the hard work of governance. Because they lacked strong leadership, they were powerless to stop provincial governors from quietly siphoning away political and economic authority. As the emperors weakened, the nobility became increasingly selfish. The nobles abandoned their devotion to the state, becoming corrupt and ease-loving. They split into fierce rival factions, most notably the Iranians and the Turanians, using the emperors as mere puppets. Worse, they began monopolizing high offices and making them hereditary, which completely closed the door for new, capable, and efficient individuals to rise through the ranks based on merit. This toxic environment led to a total collapse of administration and finance in the 18th century. Corruption and disobedience were rampant at all levels. To appease these greedy nobles, emperors started giving away Kalisa, the crown lands whose revenue went directly to the state. This drastically reduced the empire's income, pushing the central government to the verge of bankruptcy. Without money, they couldn't maintain a strong military, leaving them defenseless against foreign attacks. To understand the economic collapse, we must look at the Jagirdari system. Under the Mughals, land was divided into two groups. First was Kalisa, or crown land, where revenue went straight to the state treasury. Second was the Jagir. Instead of paying officials in cash, the state assigned them a Jagir. The official, known as a Jagirdar, collected the revenue from this land as payment for their administrative and military services. The crisis hit when Aurangzeb expanded into the Deccan. He recruited many new nobles to help govern, creating a sudden spike in the number of Jagirdars, but there simply wasn't enough land to give them. Facing a shortage of Jagirs, nobles panicked. They began violently extracting maximum revenue from the peasants, tried to make their temporary land grants hereditary, and stopped maintaining their required quotas of troops to save money, crippling the army. This Jagirdari crisis directly triggered a massive agrarian crisis. Because a noble's Jagir could be transferred to someone else at any time, they had absolutely no incentive to invest in long-term agricultural planning. Their only goal was short-term extraction, squeezing the peasants dry. In response, peasants simply abandoned their farms to escape the crushing taxes. Or worse, they rose up in armed rebellions, such as the revolts by the Satnamis, Jats, and Sikhs. While the empire was rotting from within, external challenges delivered the final blows. The devastating invasions by Nadir Shah and Ahmad Shah Abdali drained the last of the empire's wealth and destroyed its remaining military power. Finally, the emergence of the British East India Company extinguished any hope of a Mughal revival. The British had a massive advantage, coming from a society with a highly advanced economic system and superior science and technology. Historians have debated the primary cause of this monumental collapse. Irfan Habib argues that the exploitative agrarian system and resulting peasant revolts broke the empire. Satish Chandra points to the structural failure of the Jagirdari crisis as the root cause. Interestingly, the New Cambridge History of India argues the exact opposite, that the decline was actually a result of the Mughal system's economic success, which made local zamindars so wealthy and powerful that they could successfully rebel. During this decline, the power shifted heavily from the emperors to their chief ministers, or wazirs. For example, Safdarjung, the Nawab of Awadh, became a major figure, assisting Emperor Muhammad Shah. When Ahmad Shah took the throne in 1748, Safdarjung became the Grand Wazir. However, the toxic court politics we discussed earlier eventually overtook him, and rival factions had him dismissed in 1753. The man who replaced him in influence was Imad-ul-Mulk. Originally recommended for a post by Safdarjung himself, Emperor Ahmad Shah promoted Imad-ul-Mulk specifically to counter Safdarjung's growing power. This backfired spectacularly. Allied with the Marathas, Imad-ul-Mulk became the de facto ruler of Delhi. He hoarded massive amounts of tax revenue, but flatly refused to pay the Mughal army's salaries, completely alienating the emperor. Realizing his mistake, Emperor Ahmad Shah tried to reinstate Safdarjung to get rid of Imad-ul-Mulk. In response, Imad-ul-Mulk openly went to war against his own emperor. In May 1754, with Maratha backing, he defeated the imperial army, capturing the royal household. By June, he officially deposed and imprisoned Emperor Ahmad Shah, placing a puppet prince on the throne under the title Alamgir II. Amidst all this political chaos, it's worth noting how the economy functioned day to day. The Mughals used a highly organized trimetallic currency system. The silver rupaya was the standard base of the economy. The gold more or mohor was highly valuable, mostly used for hoarding wealth or presenting royal gifts. Finally, the copper dam was the everyday coin used by commoners for small daily transactions. The political instability invited further disaster. In 1756, Ahmad Shah Durrani invaded India again, this time invited by a Punjabi regent to crush Sikh rebels. He occupied Delhi, leaving his agent Najib-ud-Dawla in charge. Desperate to regain control, the Wazir Imad-ul-Mulk invited the Marathas to expel the Afghans. A massive 40,000-strong Maratha army swept in, expelled the Afghans, and made themselves the true masters of Delhi, appointing their own governor. This table perfectly summarizes how imperial policy shifted during the decline. While Aurangzeb was religiously intolerant and refused conciliation, he maintained a strong administration. His successors, Bahadur Shah, Jahandar Shah, and Farrukh Siyar, completely reversed his religious intolerance and tried to compromise with rivals like the Marathas. However, they lacked his administrative grip, leading to the rapid deterioration of both governance and state finances. Looking at the timeline, the speed of the collapse is staggering. From Aurangzeb's death in 1707, it took only decades for the empire to fracture. Key turning points like Nader Shah's invasion in 1739 and the devastating Third Battle of Panipat in 1761 stripped the empire of its wealth and military might. By 1765, the British were dictating treaties, and by 1803, the Mughal emperor was officially under British protection. To wrap up, the fall of the Mughal Empire wasn't a single event, but a long, complex process driven by weak leadership, economic crises like the Jagirdari shortage, and devastating foreign invasions. While the centralized empire fractured into independent regional states, its legacy didn't die. The sophisticated administrative institutions and traditions built by the Mughals were adopted by these new regional powers, and eventually by the British administration that took their place.